When I was younger, dreams came from magazines. No, not those kind of magazines. Well, maybe those too, but these magazines. I spent many hours perusing these magazines, back to front and front to back. I couldn't get enough. So many cars, so many interests, but I always came back to the one car. I kept seeing this full page ad for a company called Factory 5 Racing out of Massachusetts. They build Cobra kits and a bunch of other things too. Think I'm gonna get me a Cobra kit. But wait, what's that blue car on the left? This is the one and only Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe, built completely by Shelby in California. Designed by Peter Brock and currently in the Simeone Museum in Philadelphia. The only thing that was added after the first test drive was a rear spoiler, as it needed more downforce. It was a little tail happy. It was built on a crashed Cobra chassis. A wooden butt was built on the chassis on which the aluminum panels were formed. In 1965, it helped Shelby win the coveted International Manufacturers GT Championship. Then it was time for a shop tour at Factory 5. See the car for the first time in person. I found an ad for a second-hand base kit up in Montreal, so I loaded up my son, and in the U-Haul truck, we went up there to pick it up. On the way home, we picked up some LVLs for our basement remodel, and they function nicely as ramps to get the car out of the truck. Man, I'm stoked! I put the kit up for about a year to finish the basement remodel. In the meantime, found an 87 Mustang GT donor vehicle. I stripped all the parts off that I wanted and needed, and then sold the shell to a new owner that was going to revive it. Then it was time for chassis modifications. I added a bunch of stuff. I also changed the dash. I never liked the layout as the tech and the speedo were hidden by the spokes in the steering wheel. Fine for a race car, not so much a street car. Finally, it was off the powder coat. Oh snap, that rat is hot! The kit came with 15-inch wheels. I sold those and bought 17-inch wheels. Man, those 315s are wide! Now it was time to start building onto the chassis, the exciting time of the build. Starting with the front and rear suspension, then moving on to the aluminum panel install. The aluminum paneling takes a lot of measuring, marking, drilling, and riveting, but the results are nice. I went with gray for the paneling in the underhood area with black rivets to offset. Just in case there were ever any problems down the road, I added maintenance panels to the trunk area and the front driver footbox. After the brake booster was installed, it was on to the steering system. The steering rack and the steering shaft were installed, after which it was time to move on to the brake lines. I couldn't resist throwing the wheels on there for a sneak peek. While I was hard at work in the garage, An engine builder was transforming the old engine into this. Added a T5 and dropped it into the chassis, right at home. I added foam to the rear spoiler for more rigidity, received a personalized build plaque from one of the other forum members, and went on to install the electrical, starting with the fuse box. I always liked the look of the spare in the rear hatch, so I created a stand for it from an old axle. It was at this point that I enlisted the help of Mark Doherty, the traveling builder. He's an incredible resource for anything about building Factory 5 racing cars. He came out for 3 days and helped me get the engine started, get the body hung, and got the first drive. I then got a job opportunity in California, and this is what the car looked like before transport. Once we settled in, I went to the open house for Factory 5 in Huntington Beach, where I got to meet Peter Brock, the original designer of the car, and Alan Grant, one of the original drivers from the 60s. They both signed my dash. The transmission tunnel got the low car handbrake, started my OnlyFans, and continued on the build of the dash. A year went by and we said goodbye to California and went back to Maine. Couldn't resist taking the car for a quick spin up and down the road after I got it off the car transport. My son, who was involved with this build from the start, made this suggestion for a color scheme, and I liked it. In the meantime, in the garage, sound deadening was applied, and the dash started taking its final shape. Wood pieces were formed and glassed onto the underside of the hood to give the splash shield somewhere to mount to. Bed liner was used to finish off the underside of the hood. Then it was time to install the lights. I chose aftermarket lights as they are brighter than what was supplied in the kit. I also covered the fog lights with lenses as the originals had. Exciting times in Never Never Land. It was time to get the car to the painter. Conveniently, the painter only lived 50 minutes from my house, so I was able to visit often. I put in the headliner as he was going through the process, and man, the paint choices did not disappoint. After the painter was done with the chassis, I took it home to work through a list of final touches I needed to get done in order for him to put the body back on and get the car back home to me. I'm glad my son convinced me to go with the flat black. It looks killer. Now the long list of reinstalling parts starts. I built split sills so the carpet could tuck underneath and give a more finished look, as well as covers for the pontoons. Door hinge covers were formed and fabricated for a better fit and finish. One of the most overlooked custom touches of the car. I had an airbrush artist spray paint rivets on the glass hatch. The rear spoiler was installed as well as the race numbers. The number 15 held a special place in my heart as it was one of the original numbers for the Daytona Coupes, as well as the number of the house that I grew up in. Time to install the bespoke interior in the car. Man, I feel like a fighter pilot in this cockpit. Take a seat, get comfortable, and tune in next time for part 2 of the Daytona Coupe build.